Hi, Deborah Wade here. I'm glad you're here at my YouTube channel to watch this video about me painting in oil and cold wax from start to finish. I hope you both enjoy it and find it educational. I'm going to show you my process for painting in oil and cold wax from the beginning to the end. Obviously, I'm sanding these panels that will ultimately be the paintings that you see on the right. Now I'm going to gesso the panels, and I use a Liquitex acrylic gesso, putting it on with a good brush. You're going to see some brush strokes in the gesso, which I will smooth out with my bowl scraper, which you'll see here shortly. You want to use a pretty light touch with the bowl scraper. If you push down too hard, you'll actually remove too much of the gesso. It doesn't take much to smooth it out. I'm going to give each of the panels a light sanding now. The gesso tends to raise the grain of the wood just a little bit if you haven't applied a coat of GAC 100 on the panel before you put the gesso on. There's no harm in gessoing right on the wood, but that's why I am giving them a little bit of a sanding just to smooth them out just a tiny bit. So I'm going to apply my first layer. I always use a first layer of Indian yellow and cold wax. I started using Indian yellow when I was first experimenting with cold wax, and it's just become my routine. And I start with a layer, no matter what the size of the painting is, no matter what my, if it's going to be an abstract painting, straight abstract, or even in my traditional representational work, I tend to tone my canvases or my surface with Indian yellow and go from there. I am mixing half paint, and I'm using Gablin Indian yellow. Sennelier is a wonderful Indian yellow as well. I'm just out of it. But I'm mixing half and half cold wax and pigment, spreading it on with a palette knife. And now I'm taking my bowl scraper. This is a silicone bowl scraper that you can get through Amazon for about $6. And apparently you use it to scrape out bowls. I've never had one in my kitchen, honestly. Never even heard of them until I started looking into alternative tools to use with cold wax. And I just love it. I actually use it to paint traditional work as well. I like to spread it from side to side or edge to edge. Here's a little bit closer look at what I've been doing. You can see that I'm spreading it almost edge to edge on all of these. I like it to be fairly smooth. There's times where I actually put quite a bit of texture in that first layer with thick and thin areas. It does build up on your silicone brush. You just have to simply wipe it off. I lay it flat sometimes to get the excess off, but you can just scrape it off with a palette knife as well. Smoothing it out. Each one can be different because there are really cool things that you can do. For instance, this, make lines, You can build up thicker areas of paint. I'm gonna leave that one. I like that a little bit thinner here. Okay. I'll be back with the next layer. Okay, we're back, and I thought I had the camera rolling. I've done that before, and it wasn't. So just to recap, I have put a couple of other layers on top of the Indian yellow. There's a layer of quinacridone red and a layer of Viridian. And I think that there was also some transparent brown oxide in there as well. Now I'm mixing up some more Viridian and cold wax. I'm not mixing a huge pile because at this stage I'm also testing to see if it's what I want before I go on to the next one. And a little really does go a long way in these transparent layers. Spread very thin. I've also added some of the Gamblin non-solvent gel. Making a few marks with the edge of the silicone scraper just to add some early interest. Here I'm about to mix some cerulean, or wait, this is manganese blue, and I'm really low. I'm struggling to squeeze any out. It's one of my favorite blues though, and I do use it a lot. I'll have to order another huge tube. It's not a transparent pigment. It's important to know what pigments are transparent and what are not, because they do make a difference in the order and how they act with each other as you lay them down. Now I'm mixing a little pile of violet. It is a violet that's right out of the tube, but more often than not I actually do mix my own violet, and my favorite mixture is from cobalt blue and quinacridone magenta with titanium white. It makes kind of a periwinkle violet, which is more of a blue violet, I guess. All right, well, I'm finishing up these layers now, wiping off my scraper. Okay, these have set up for about an hour, and I actually just sprinkled some embossing powder, which I never do. So again, experimentation is a way you can either find a new effect that you love or learn that what you just did doesn't work. So I'm taking my scraper and kind of embedding this into the wax. Or into the paint and wax. Hi, I'm back. So these paintings have now set up for about an hour or so, and they are ready for my next few layers. Just as a recap, I applied an initial layer of Indian yellow, and on top of that I have a couple of layers of quinacridone magenta and viridian, manganese blue, and I think a little bit of cadmium red medium. They've all been mixed with 50% cold wax and a little bit of Gamblin's non-solvent gel, which just makes the paint a little bit glossier when it dries. I really do like it. I don't use it all the time, but in my transparent underlayers, I tend to use it. So I am mixing a light blue to start the lighter values that I'm going to be putting on top of the dark values that I've already laid in. I'm using cobalt blue and titanium white and 50% cold wax. I usually mix the color prior to putting in the cold wax to make sure I have what I want. You'll see me doing that here. And then I add the cold wax, approximately a third to half paint and cold wax. Now I'm adding the first swatches of light blue. You'll see me applying it and spreading out a little bit with the bowl scraper. A little more deliberate in the application at this point because I'm paying a lot of attention to composition and to my values. You'll see that I've made a decision to spread this light blue value of paint a little more extensively across the 6x6 surface. And my thought process was that I wanted to have some areas where when I go back into these layers with etching and some dissolving techniques that I use with odorless mineral spirits, I wanted to start with a little bit of a lighter layer. And I'm also making lines, digging in a few places just to add some interest. I'm now going to be mixing a small pile of titanium white in viridian, cold wax. What I'm thinking about now is I want the color shifts to be subtle between these lighter layers, and the temperature shift between the cobalt blue and the viridian, the warms and the cools, start to play together in these top layers. You can see that some of the paint I've applied in diagonals, spreading it out. Now I've grabbed my palette knife and I am going to start making some scratches and etches into the surface to reveal what's underneath. This is really a fun part, the mark making, as it's referred to in etching, using different types of tools, really starts to bring the design and composition to its fruition. It's a lot of fun. Now I'm using a tool called an oiler boiler. It's got a little bit of a sort of like a needle on the top of it that you squeeze the mineral spirits out of. And I use odorless mineral spirits or Gamsol. And I have just sort of flicked some drops, and then I put a spiral shape on that top right one. And now I'm taking my bowl scraper and pulling back to see what's been revealed. I didn't let this sit very long. I usually start out with just a few seconds to see what I'm going to have. You can always go back over it if you want to reveal more. Now I'm using the edge of the scraper to make some lines, taking it down to the first layers. And I decided to go back in and put a little bit more of the mineral spirits to dissolve down deeper to the yellow. I wanted more yellow to be showing. Kind of testing it there, yeah. So you'll see that on this side, some of the drips and the drops are continuing to dissolve it, and I went back with the scraper to reveal a little bit more. Now I'm taking a brush to soften the edges and a piece of paper towel to clean it up. It creates a really nice effect. Diagonal lines, no particular reason, but it's all part of the composition. In my mind's eye, as I'm making this, I'm actually thinking a lot about night scenes and lights in the distance, night sky, low horizons. I'm mixing up a little more white and Viridian to go back in to add some more touches. And I'm pressing really hard with the palette knife to create some etching in lines at this point. I'm not letting the paint set up in between applications. I want it soft and pliable. I'm adding more odorless mineral spirits. And now I'm taking my bowl scraper to reveal what it has dissolved down to, and I'm really loving those orbs, spots, dots, whatever you want to call them. Same thing on all the other ones. There's a lot of interest that's really starting to form. The texture is getting really interesting, partly because the embossing, I keep wanting to say embossing fluid. That's not what it is. Embossing glitter, whatever it is peeking through. It's almost like a sand. Now I'm taking a pencil and I am scribbling, making marks that are to emulate sort of a text. I don't do this very often either. Drawing little rectangles and circles. Sometimes it's hard to explain the choices and why I do what I do, but this just needed a little extra detail, I think. And the thing about cold wax and oil paint is that if you do something like this, you can always cover it up. There's really nothing particularly precious about it, even though it can be really hard to do that, because you might make a mark that you really like, but if it's not working with the rest of the painting, there's no sense in keeping it. But there's a lot of forgiveness in this medium. So this was really interesting. I mixed up some manganese blue here and a little bit of titanium white and applied it, and I knew immediately that I didn't like it. So this is a really good example of, now what do I do? So I started spreading it out and working with it a little bit, and I'm wiping off my scraper here. It's one of the beauties of this medium too, is just keeping things clean is so easy. And so I'm exerting a lot of pressure with that scraper, so you can see I'm almost removing it, but I'm not really interrupting or disturbing the layers underneath. Kind of spreading it out, making it just a little bit more subtle. So after I got done fooling around with that blue, I'm cleaning off my palette, and keeping it clean is really important. And I'm being really good about it because I know I'm videotaping myself, but there's a lot of times that I get really caught up in the fury of painting and I have just paint everywhere. It's a big mess. And I am laying out some titanium white and sort of a gray olive green bluish pigment. I can't remember the name of that, but I wanted to add a neutral touch here and there. I sped this up a little bit so that we can get through a little bit faster, but you can still see what I'm doing. Adding this gray neutral in strategic areas, spreading it out, blending it in. I'm mixing up some titanium white now with some quinacridone magenta for a light valued pink. You'll see that I'm very intentional in where I place these pieces of paint. And the reason is they have great potential of either making or breaking a painting. That's the bottom line. In both the pops of color, the shape that they're in, and the color that I'm laying them up against. And now I'm just keeping them in basically the shape that I put them down in, but softening the edges. If you're a painter that was trained with traditional principles, when we talk about edges are just as important in abstract painting as they are in traditional painting, the edge of a vase or the edges around an apple. So it's the same thing. You don't want every edge in an abstract painting to be hard or sharp, and you don't want every edge to be soft. You really need a mixture of edges that shows depth and atmosphere in your painting. And here I'm just using the edge of the palette knife to etch in again, actually making little tiny swirly lines down to the yellow again, so you can see how important that first layer of Indian yellow was for future mark making and etching that I'm doing with various tools. Now here I'm taking a wax-based pigment stick, and I am softening it in a pool of mineral spirits to make it kind of fluid. And it's just cadmium red. And I'm adding a touch in that area that I carved out with the boiler in mineral spirits earlier, making little marks here and there. I decided not to use too much of that, I guess. So I'm about to finish these up, and the final touch is some white highlights or bling. I've mixed some titanium white and cold wax and some of the non-solvent gel, making little dots, embellishments. I'm using a little silicone brush that's about the size of a rigger. I wanted to fan that pink piece of paint that I had put on earlier. Back to the oiler boiler. And again, that's filled with odorless mineral spirits. And I didn't let that sit there very long. I just want to add a little bit of dissolving effect. You don't want to noodle too much when you get to this stage of a painting. And now I'm etching with my palette knife and revealing once again those initial layers of yellow. So I'm signing them, and you'll see that I'm signing a couple in the right lower corner and a couple in the left lower corner, because if it's really busy in the right corner, which is where I usually sign it, the signature can get lost. So I try to sign it in a place that you can see it clearly. On this one, I decided that the orientation of that painting at the last second needed to be completely different than when I was painting it. That happens sometimes. So I'm taking the tape off. These have dried for several days. And any artist that tapes their paintings will know that taking that tape off is the most exciting and fun part of the whole process. There's just something about the big reveal that is incredibly gratifying. And you can see that I use just plain blue painter's tape. I have another video in my on my YouTube channel talking about taping paintings, the technique, what I use, and how to take it off. One of these paintings had a little bit of the yellow that leaked under the tape, and I sometimes leave that because it's really part of the process. And if it doesn't look, if it doesn't distract from the overall composition, yeah, right there. I'm just going to probably leave that. You can see the texture from the embossing powder that I laid in there early on. It's like a sand. It's added some really, really interesting texture to the paint. I really like it. Well, here are the finished paintings that I took some better quality photographs of. You can see all this wonderful detail and that Indian yellow peeking out. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm really glad you were here, and I hope this was really helpful. Also, feel free to leave a comment, ask any questions, or reach out to me through email or through my website. Thanks again.